Hi friends, regular viewers will know that I often make full episodes. These can often be an hour long, even 2 hours. Sometimes these are talking about an event or a collection of things on a theme. Others are literally an hour or more diving into one single game and doing a real breakdown about it. For example, on the day that this video goes up, I'll be putting out my review of Drag and Drive, or Drag X Drive as it's written, or Drag Drive like anime fans might mistakenly think that it's pronounced. You might wonder how someone could talk for an hour or more about such a seemingly simple game, but I actually think it's a fascinating case study and an excuse to deep dive into Nintendo history, business, and design philosophy. It's currently rendering, so I hope I'll be able to upload it and set it live soon, and I hope you will check it out. But as you will also know, I often take these long episodes and split them into multiple small videos, podcast clips, and I do this for several reasons. Some people don't have time to listen to long episodes and are more likely to click on shorter ones. Also, it makes it easier for new viewers to find the channel in the first place because it allows me to have more specific titles and tags so that people searching for a specific subject or game can find it. It also allows me to make new thumbnails, and honestly, the thumbnails are one of my favourite parts of working on this channel. I spend just as much or even more time making them than I do the episodes themselves. I put a lot of my personality and humour into them, little Easter eggs or things that I think are cool or funny ideas. I recorded the first ever episode of this podcast on the first day that the Switch 2 launched, and it has always been my intention to cover every single game that releases. I don't know if that will be possible in the future. The Switch 1 had literally tens of thousands of games after all, but for now, in this early period, I've done a pretty darn good job so far. I'm keeping a spreadsheet of every game released and all the future games announced, along with notes, key details on developer, publisher, price, download size, any DLC or deluxe versions, whether it's a physical release, game key card, digital only, etc., etc. This allows me to make cool summary videos, potentially maybe even write a book in the future. If that's something you'd be interested in, let me know. But it also allows me to clearly see which games I have or haven't covered yet, which ones I should give more coverage to, etc. One key game that should have been a pretty big release for me was Shadow Labyrinth. A Pac-Man Metroidvania, a series that I love, a genre that I love. This was a shoo-in to get a full review. But I got to the party a bit late because it released the day after Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I was all wrapped up in coverage on that one. Adore that game. I did eventually get around to covering Shadow Labyrinth, and I made a small review, but somewhat hidden away inside another episode where I talked about multiple games, rather than dedicating a full video to it. Of course, like normal, I split it into a separate clip, then uploaded it to YouTube, ready to schedule it to put it live at some point in the future when the time felt right. But the time never felt right. I haven't set that video live, and I've realised why. You see, Shadow Labyrinth is a game that I want to love. Sadly, I didn't, spoilers. I just couldn't get on with it. I feel that it's a game that other people definitely will enjoy and should play. And the fact that they will play it and enjoy it makes me happy. I don't want to just shit on it and make people less likely to try it out in the first place. It's an interesting idea. There are things about it that I think are genuinely cool. It's trying to do something different, and I applaud it for that. In fact, it's probably similar to how I feel about Drag and Drive. That's a game currently getting pretty awful reviews. Everyone is crapping on it, but it's a game that I personally really like. And while I understand all the negative reviews, they do raise fair points. Each new one that's posted slightly frustrates me because I think it makes people less likely to try it out and see for themselves if they actually like it or not, without judgment clouded by others or wanting to be part of the pack and just pile on and criticize because it's cool. Because of this, I feel weirdly protective over drag and drive, in a way that makes me want to gloss over its shortcomings and end up liking it even more than I probably would otherwise, like I'm kind of rooting for the underdog. And I imagine that if I uploaded my mini review for Shadow Labyrinth by itself, many fans of that game would come out of the woodwork and feel the need to defend their own weird little imperfect game with neat ideas that make it kind of cool if you can get past the negative stuff. And Drag and Drive also is similar to Shadow Labyrinth in that both have a kind of bleak, empty, semi-futuristic, brutalistic feel to the setting and graphics, which many read as bland or without personality. For me, this is definitely a problem for Drag and Drive 2, but it's one that I can get past because of the colour and customization options for the player character themselves, and the fact the motion controls allow you to add your own personality, making your character wave, dance, high-five, etc. But the art style for Shadow Labyrinth was the biggest hurdle for me personally, and one that I do find hard to get over. I especially don't like the cover art and logo, which is another reason I've not wanted to set the clip of my review live. I don't like having a boring or ugly thumbnail on my channel. I like to do fun stuff with them, and the cover art of the game just doesn't really inspire me and doesn't really work for the look of my channel. There's also just the fact that I am a huge Pac-Man fan. Literally, as I record this episode now, if I look around the room, there are several pieces of Pac-Man merch, some of which have been with me since the 1980s as a kid. If I can, I'll try and edit in some B-roll footage here of really neat little wind-up clockwork early 1980s Pac-Man toys here. My parents buying these for me when I was little is probably a big reason why I still adore and feel loyal to the series to this day. I mean, look at them, they're adorable. But also, as a long-term collector, journalist, producer of documentaries, and even a developer of games myself, I just have so much respect for Pac-Man and what it did for the industry. Heck, I've a game of my own that will be announced and covered extensively on this channel in October, that while a pretty big, expansive, deep experience, I hope, literally evolved itself from me starting off trying to make a simple Pac-Man-inspired game with a twist. But then, as it developed, it spiraled into completely its own thing, with simulation, RPG, and story elements, multiple playstyles completely unrecognizable to many from a Pac-Man clone. But there's still that underlying and undeniable influence of Pac-Man. It's a game from a top-down perspective. The worlds are somewhat maze-like. You run from enemies, in inverted commas, and then there's a twist where sometimes you change form and you chase down the characters that were initially chasing you. Everyone who's previewed the game so far tells me how unique it is and how I've created something completely original, and I tell them no. Think about it, I'm basically just riffing on Pac-Man and the ghosts. It's funny, so many modern games, even in the AAA space, which is very much not me, by the way, this is a solo indie dev project I'm talking about, but so many games owe an enormous debt to the little yellow guy. And so, for all of this, I've not really wanted to put up my review of Shadow Labyrinth. But today feels the right day to do so, what with it also being the day that I'll be standing up for the much maligned Drag and Drive. The world will be in balance, somewhat. But also, to make more of a fitting tribute, I'm going to combine my somewhat negative, or at least lukewarm, review with a clip of my absolutely elated live reaction to the recent reveal of Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac, and then my detailed after-show breakdown of exactly why I'm so hyped for that game and why I think Bandai Namco are really releasing it in about the best way they possibly could for the Switch 2 as it stands right now. So we will end on a positive note, and heck, it allows me to do a fun thing with the thumbnail, combining the box arts of both Pac-Man games, some colour so it's not all grimdark, and I can even do one of those quirky visual jokes that I do that perhaps amuse only me and no one else cares, and I will include the Drag and Drive logo but swap the basketball for a Pac-Man. Yeah. At the time of recording this, I've not done it yet, but in my head, that's a neat idea, and I think it'll look cool. Again, I don't like to upload a video unless I can think of something fun for the thumbnail. Hopefully that's why at least some of you watching this video clicked on it in the first place. If you enjoy the video, I'd really appreciate it, by the way, if you dropped a like, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, thank you, welcome back. And I'd especially love it if you'd leave a comment. Let me know what your favourite Pac-Man game is. Are you looking forward to Pac-Man World 2 like me? Have you played Shadow Labyrinth? If so, I really hope that you did enjoy it. I don't want to be too negative about the game. I actually saw a lot to like there, and I'm kind of disappointed that I find that I can't really get into it, even though I give it a proper try. Let me know. Don't forget, we also have a free members area where you can chat with me, request games to review, and even enter free competitions to win official Nintendo prizes. For that, and all the ways to listen and support the show, thank you very much if you do. It's linktree/dailyswitch2, linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Okay, so here's where I'm going to insert my original review for Shadow Labyrinth. Again, apologies in advance if you've already played the game and you happen to be one of those people who love it. I'm really glad for you if you do. Then afterwards, we'll get on to Pac-Man World 2 as somewhat of a palate cleanser. Now, roll the clip. Wakka, 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 wakka. That's meant to be Pac-Man, not Fozzie Bear. The next game released that I hadn't covered at the time of my compiling my top 10 was Shadow Labyrinth, developed and published by Bandai Namco. The main reason I didn't cover this game is it released on the 18th of July, just one day after Donkey Kong Bonanza, and for me, I'm afraid there was no way I was going to tear myself away from my beloved Bonanza to be able to dedicate enough time to honestly give this one a fair review. I did buy it, however, so let's take this opportunity to give a mini overview, as it's at the very least an interesting premise, and it's available at a reasonable price too. Some of you might remember the animated anthology series Secret Level that came out on Amazon at the end of 2024, I believe, where each episode was based on a different video game. It was created by Tim Miller, who you might know as the director of Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate, and one of the main producers of the Sonic live-action movies, which I love, by the way. I personally thought the series was overall pretty good, though one reason it became infamous is that while most of the episodes were based on timeless classics like Warhammer 40k, Space Marine, Unreal Tournament, Armored Core, even Dungeons & Dragons, Mega Man and Pac-Man, they had one episode based on Concord, which hadn't released at the time, but obviously went down as one of the biggest failures and embarrassments in gaming history, with the service being taken down almost immediately after launch and all retail copies taken off shelves and refunds issued to people who bought in the week or two when they were available. So dedicating an entire episode to that was somewhat of a shame. Probably the second most infamous episode, however, was the Pac-Man episode, because rather than what you might expect when imagining an animated episode based on Pac-Man, the series went with a dark sci-fi title where a humanoid creature with no memories, known only as Swordsman Number 7, wakes up in a large underground complex, a labyrinth of sorts, or maze, you see what they did there, and he is told that he is the chosen one and he must escape. Considering the dark art style and the human using a sword, it all seemed very serious and far removed from what we know as Pac-Man. However, there is a floating yellow orb named Puck, who talks to him, guides him, and sometimes merges with him to give him certain powers of attack or traversal. Those of you who know your history will realize that the original name of Pac-Man on its creation was Puck-Man, because of his resemblance to a hockey puck, but they were worried that people in the West would vandalize the arcade cabinets to turn the P into an F, and so he became Pac-Man. Without giving spoilers as to what happens in the episode, because, you might be interested to check it out, Shadow Labyrinth is a sequel to this episode, and you control Swordsman Number 8 in a very similar setup. It's an interesting concept, but it's all very silly, and it feels a little overblown and like it's taking itself far more seriously than any game based on Pac-Man arguably should. The graphic style of the maze and the ghosts that you encounter is barely recognizable for most of the time, and it's only really when you fuse with Puck and temporarily look like Pac-Man and can perform certain moves that feel reminiscent of the game that you feel any kind of connection to the series at all. It's a Metroidvania game, a genre I'm a really big fan of. Literally, earlier in this episode, I asked Konami for more Castlevania titles. I also mentioned that I'm developing 4 games of my own, and the biggest and most ambitious of those titles is a Metroidvania title. This really is a genre that I enjoy when it's done well. But it's also one that I'm very tired of having generic, blandly designed copy-paste titles quickly shat out every few hours. It's one of those genres where I kind of honestly feel that the very best titles are some of the very best games ever made, but you have to wade through some of the blandest cookie-cutter dross ever made in order to get to them. As for Pac-Man, again, I'm a huge fan of the license, and some of my favourite games ever involve the little guy. I've a ton of Pac-Man merch and toys that I've been collecting literally my whole life. Similar to what I said in my Donkey Kong review, I've been alive throughout every up and down for the character. The first Pac-Man game was released just, I think, less than a year before I was born. And I've lived through every game release from Miss Pac-Man onwards. It's just as I said with the Metroidvania games, you could count some Pac-Man games as absolutely in my top tier gaming experiences of my life, but sadly many of them are also completely forgettable shovelware or worse. So where does this game fall then? Honestly, if you'd have said to me to imagine a Pac-Man based Metroidvania, I would have actually got very excited, as I can imagine how that could be an absolutely incredible game, but what they've made here is not even remotely what I would have imagined. On the one hand, I want to give it brownie points for being a truly original and surprising reimagining of the series, but on the other hand, it's very, very difficult for me to get past the fact that unfortunately, I'm sorry, really don't like the art style. I am genuinely, truly sorry in advance for what I'm about to say. I know it'll rub some people up the wrong way, and some people will disagree, and that's perfectly fine. It's a matter of taste. Look, the art is clean and crisp, sure, and I've seen some people even praising it, but it's divisive, to say the least, and to me, it is just plain ugly. It looks like those early 2000s shovelware budget PC titles, which used kind of clip art and poorly rendered 3D with everything being kind of metallic or glowy or shiny for no reason. Even the cover art looks like the type of game that you'd have seen in a gas station for $1.99. The logo and the art are just awful, generic slop, and the in-game graphics look similarly like they could be reusing assets from an early 2000s clip art library for creating click and play games or flash titles. Do you remember that awful time when they tried to make an edgy Bomberman game but replaced all the cartoon characters with rendered humans in shiny metal 90s CGI with PNG explosions and thought people would think it was somehow cooler? And everyone roundly rejected it as one of the ugliest games that had ever been made. Yet that's what this looks like to me. Only with high-res graphics, auto-tweening between positions like a Macromedia Flash browser game. As an artist myself, I really, really hate to criticize work that I know somebody will have worked very hard on. And I'm sure that it is all unique art created just for this game. But for me, the style just feels so generic and without personality while moving like a tweened Flash title that it's just really hard for me to get past. I'm sure this is a matter of taste. And as I said, I have seen some people praising it, but in the comments section of like every video that I've found about the title, I see many people getting the same genuine ick as me when they look at it, so I'm far from alone in feeling like this. It is a real shame. I feel guilty, and again, I apologize to the artists involved. It's
technically good work, just in a style that brings to mind many of the worst tropes of a certain quite dark period in gaming. Maybe some people are nostalgic for that style, and that's why we're here. I don't know. Maybe people who were literally growing up and had their formative years when that kind of overly shiny chrome or just everything being kind of brown and grey was cool. Maybe. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. Let me know in the comments if you like the way this looks. I'm genuinely interested. To me, I really don't. But again, I don't want to crap on other people's work. I'm sure it's a me thing. It just feels to me like this is the exact opposite of what I personally find visually appealing. Except for the odd flashes of neon colour and pixel art that do randomly appear. But they are few and far between, and I feel they seem completely separate to the normal art style, to the point that it makes the standard art feel like placeholders from another game, to my eyes at least. In the random occasional times when it turns into kind of more colourful, more pixely graphics, it feels to me, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. But the two styles to me just don't mesh at all. But of course, graphics aren't everything, and the gameplay is where it does genuinely start to get interesting. I played it for a couple of hours to get the feel and give it a chance, and it does control well, and there is some interesting level design even early on, and attacking and movement mechanics going on. It's not just a standard generic Metroidvania. It's got some interesting ideas. It's clearly a step above, the most generic copy-paste Metroidvanias, and the times when it all goes a bit Pac-Man, with sections where you get neon-tinged pixel graphics like I mentioned, and a proper Pac-Man maze rather than just a kind of Metroidvania, everything's made out of squares look. It starts to feel more interesting to me in those moments, and I'm sure that there's probably a good game under here if you aren't put off by the art style, but honestly, for me, with it releasing a day after DK Bonanza, after that first 2 hours of playing it, I've not felt inclined to go back to it and give it more of a chance. So I'm sorry, I can't review the game. I can't give it a score or anything like that. It would be extremely unfair of me to do so, having seen so little of the campaign. But I wanted to at least cover it, because I'm sure there are some people that are looking at the graphics and thinking, hey, it looks okay. And as I said, the gameplay itself has potential, and from what I've played, it seems like it could be pretty fun. It's not a system exclusive. You can play this on PC, PS5, Xbox Series S, X, and the Switch One as well. And here's the kicker. If you buy on Switch One, you get the full game on the cartridge, whereas the physical release of the Switch 2 version isn't even a keycard, it's a code in a box. I've previously heaped praise upon Bandai Namco for releasing a full physical copy of Tamagotchi Plaza, a game that I did a full review on. I wasn't expecting to like it, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by it, and I'll happily recommend to anyone that's even vaguely interested in it. However, I do understand that Bandai Namco wanted to release this game, Shadow Labyrinth, as a $30 kind of budget-ish game. And as I've discussed at length in other episodes, unfortunately, at the moment, it's basically impossible to release a proper physical Switch 2 game at that price point. And even a game keycard, it's hard to make a profit on at that price. So I don't actually blame them, though it does make it even harder to recommend the Switch 2 version code in a box. For those who don't know my other episodes, trust me, I'm a game dev and publisher myself, and that $30 price point is actually exactly where I was planning on targeting my own games themselves when they came to the Switch 2, including the Metroidvania that I mentioned. So I do kind of know what I'm talking about, as it has put me in a real dilemma if Nintendo don't change their policies. But as we covered in another episode, it does look like they are working on a solution. For now, though, we are left with the annoying releases like this, where you end up buying an empty box just to put on the shelf. Yay. At least it only takes up 8GB of storage, and that's not too bad, and it won't take too long to download. Here's a really weird thing, though, and credit to the channel Switch Corner, they made an interesting video on this, where they pointed out that the Switch 1 version somehow actually runs much better than the Switch 2 version. There is literally no excuse for that. The Switch 1 version does run at 720p, which upscales to 1080 when docked. The Switch 2 version runs at 1080 or 4K, but the real difference is the frame rate. The Switch 1 version is pretty much locked at 60 FPS, whereas the Switch 2 version is constantly fluctuating anywhere between 40 and 60, and it stutters a lot, especially when changing areas. The Switch 1 version has longer loading times on startup, but once you are playing, there's no worries, and the loading of the Switch 1 version is much faster when you play it on the Switch 2. And honestly, with these graphics, does the difference between 4K or 1080p make very much difference to 720? Not really. In fact, I'd argue half the problem with the graphics, as far as to my eyes, but also from reading other people's comments as well, half the problem with the graphics is they are too clean. Especially for something that's meant to be kind of dark and dingy in a Metroidvania. They look too clean, too crisp, too perfect. They don't look organic or real. So actually having a lower resolution, slightly fuzzier version might even look better, and the 4K makes them look worse. So yeah, I can't give a fair review of this game, because I've not played enough of it, and my personal bias against the art style would make it too hard to do so anyway. But if you do like the look of it, which I know some people will, I do think it's an interesting and original idea, and it seems to play pretty well, and it is a reasonable price. It's one of the cheaper games on the system, so maybe give it a try. But if you do, perhaps buying the physical Switch 1 copy and playing it on your Switch 2 is the best way to go. The full game is on the Switch 1 card, and unless the Switch 2 version gets patched, you might find it even performs significantly better. And again, to Bandai Namco's credit, if you buy the Switch 1 version, you can upgrade it to Switch 2 for free. Thank you. I've criticized other big companies like Sega for not offering this option repeatedly. But again, unless they fix things with the patch, we're in a weird position where you might not actually want to upgrade, because for now at least, the Switch 1 version actually runs better, and it runs fine on the Switch 2. And again, credit to Switch Corner for trying this, but once you download the update to the digital Switch 1 version on Switch 2, it's quite difficult to revert back to the original. So you really want to play the Switch 1 version directly from the cartridge, even if you're on a Switch 2. Don't download the free update unless it gets patched, and Google around and see whether that has changed over time. I hope it does. I hope Bandai Namco fixes this. So yeah, obviously this game not entering my top 10, but I'm not really giving it a yay or a nay. I think this will be your mileage may vary as to whether you think it looks cool, and if you do think it looks cool, I do want to give props to Bandai Namco for releasing at a reasonable price point and offering the free upgrade. But yeah, as I said, maybe go for the Switch 1 physical version instead of the Switch 2, and we hope this isn't really Bandai Namco's fault, or the performances, but the releasing on a code in a box isn't really Bandai Namco's fault. It's Nintendo's fault, and hopefully things will change as time goes by, and we'll see this happen less often.
Right, and now as your promised palate cleanser, here is a clip of my genuine live reaction to the reveal of the Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac, before we get into my deeper thoughts on the game.
Jump back on the horse. September 26th, okay. Repac! Repac, oh, please be Pac-Man World 2. Yeah. Okay, Game of the Direct, I'm calling it now. Oh, I love this game so much. And Repac of Pac-Man World 1 was really cool. I really enjoyed that. The remake is kind of ground up remake, and I thought they did a really good job. This looks great. Please have a dedicated Switch 2 version, and please release a boxed version, something I can have on my shelf. Please, Pac-Man. Please, Namco. Yes! Physical copy for Switch 2 and physical copy for Switch 1. September 26th. Okay, sick. Oh man, whatever comes next. I'm sorry, I'm still going to be talking about Pac-Man. Oh, it looks like Final Fantasy Tactics. That's cool. I like Final Fantasy. I'm not a tactics RPG guy though, as I've said before. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's cool. I know it's considered a good game, but oh man, Pac-Man World 2. Yes. Oh, I am so hyped for that. That's so cool. Just in my last episode, I did a kind of quick overview of Shadow Labyrinth, and I felt really guilty because I love Pac-Man, but I could not gel with that game. Pac-Man World 2, on the other hand, that is, to me, one of the best Pac-Man games ever. Yeah, so as you can hear, I was pretty darn excited for that reveal, and I still am. Here's our third and final clip from my tier list episode, where I talked about the game in more detail, along with why I'm so happy with how Bandai Namco are handling this particular release. Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. Yes. If you listen to my live reaction, you'll know that I was very, very excited about this one. It's coming out on both the Switch 1 and 2. There is a physical version for both, although sadly the Switch 2 version is a keycard, but you know, that's par for the course, and as we'll cover, it's at a bargain price, so that's great. And we have a release date. Amazing. September the 26th. It's coming out pretty soon, and I can't wait for it. Fantastic game. I'm really looking forward to this one. So obviously by the Re-Pac, or maybe not obviously, this is a remake of a game that was originally released many years ago for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and for Nintendo players, GameCube. Came out in 2002, I think, and later on PC. And there was a Game Boy Advance version as well, but obviously, predictably, it wasn't the same game as the Xbox, GameCube, and PlayStation 2 version. And Pac-Man World 2, obviously, was a sequel to Pac-Man World 1, or just Pac-Man World, which came out on the original PlayStation PS1 in 1999. Now, I loved the PS1 game. There are many great 3D platformers on the PS1, and Pac-Man World is right up there. It doesn't have the full freedom that you would get in some 3D platform games. Some of the sections are more kind of 2.5D-esque, but I really think that Pac-Man World is a great game. And we got a remake, or Re-Pac as they call them, of Pac-Man World 1 in 2022 from Now Production and published by Bandai Namco. Obviously, Pac-Man, the original arcade game, was a Namco game originally, and nowadays it's Bandai Namco. And that Re-Pac was absolutely excellent. It was a ground-up remake. It wasn't just a high-res upscaling. No, it was a ground-up remake, and I loved it. I played it. I bought it and played it to death on the Switch, and I really enjoyed it. So we are now getting a Re-Pac of the second game from the same developers. Thank you. I ranted a bit in my Tony Hawk's review about how Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 was a fantastic, well-received remake, and then the developers were promptly fired, and the sequel was not as good because it had different developers. No, this has the same developers, so I absolutely trust that this will be just as high quality and just as enjoyable as the first one. But this is a remake of the game, which was not a PlayStation 1 game, but a PlayStation 2 game, and Xbox and GameCube and PC. So as you might imagine, it is a more advanced 3D platformer, and more like what you might imagine from a fully fledged 3D platformer. Feels a bit more kind of modern. I know, it's over 20 years old now, but more modern in how it plays. So having a modern version of this game will be really, really cool. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, Pac-Man, obviously classic maze game, one of the granddaddy games of all gaming. But you might be thinking, yeah, if you haven't played them, how good can a 3D platformer be based on Pac-Man? And isn't it just a bit of an excuse to use a character that everybody knows and put them in a platform game? Pac-Man isn't platforming, it's arcade-based maze running. No. Pac-Land, which was an arcade game which came out in 1984, Pac-Land, one of the earliest sequels to Pac-Man, was, by some people's measure, the original platform game. The original 2D platform game came out in 1984, before Super Mario Brothers. And Shigeru Miyamoto himself even admits that Pac-Land was an influence on the original Super Mario Brothers. And he said that he was visiting Tokyo and he saw that Namco had developed a platform game, and he decided that the sequel to Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers, the arcade game, should be a side-scrolling left-to-right platform game with running and jumping, just like Pac-Land was. So it's not that Pac-Land was a rip-off of Super Mario Brothers, it's that Super Mario Brothers was an iteration inspired at least partially by Pac-Land. So Pac-Land has just as much heritage for platforming as any other game. So it was fantastic when he finally got his own 3D platforming game on the PS1, and it was a quality title. And then Pac-Man World 2 is even better, and in my opinion is the best in the series, and I think many people think that as well. So to get a remake is absolutely fantastic. Incidentally, interestingly, Shigeru Miyamoto, I believe, said the fact that Super Mario Brothers has a blue sky is directly because of Pac-Land, because he saw it and thought it looked cool, whereas previously all of Miyamoto's games had just had a plain black background. If you think of the original Mario Brothers or Donkey Kong, there was no sky, it was just black in the background. So Pac-Land is indirectly responsible for the blue skies like these of Super Mario Brothers, and therefore subsequently Sonic the Hedgehog and Daytona USA. Yeah, so epoch making decision there from Miyamoto. The Re-Pac game, it says there is a added 2-player cooperative version, which looked interesting, with the second player kind of controlling like a floating Pac drone that attacks people and can get collectibles and stuff. So it's not, full co-op, but the kind of thing you can imagine a little brother or sister or a young child, as your parent is playing, or your young child can control the partner character and feel like they're getting on. The remake also adds some quality of life improvements, expands on the levels, and one nice touch, I thought, is it adds voice acting, including the voice of Pac-Man is Martin Sherman. And you might say, who's Martin Sherman? Well, he just happened to be the voice of Pac-Man in the original Pac-Man World 3. So they've got the voice actor from Pac-Man World 3 to add voice acting to Pac-Man World 2 when it gets remade. I think that's really nice to have that to have that continuity there, and really respectful of the original voice actor rather than just picking a random new voice actor. I thought that was great. So as I say, it is out on Switch 1 and Switch 2 day and date. The same price for both. The Switch 2 version isn't more expensive, so I think that's fantastic. As I say, there is physical versions. Unfortunately, the Switch 2 version is a game key card, and I don't think there is an upgrade path for those that might buy the Switch 1 version and would want to then upgrade to have shinier graphics on the Switch 2. doesn't look like there'll be an upgrade, but there might be. We don't know. That might come later on down the line, and it just hasn't been announced yet. Bandai Namco have done that with some of their games, including Shadow Labyrinth, a game that I covered recently, which was a Pac-Man spin-off. So it's in the Pac-Man universe, and if you bought the Switch 2 version of that, it was a code in a box, so they obviously felt bad about that. So they allowed anyone who bought the Switch 1 version, which obviously is a cartridge and the game comes fully on the cartridge, they allowed people to upgrade for free. So kudos to Bandai Namco for that. So hopefully they'll do the same with Pac-Man World 2. But even if they don't, the game key card is just $30. I think $30 for this game is very, very reasonable. They could have charged much more, but $30 is a great price. Now, there is a deluxe edition, and I know I've been moaning about deluxe editions and different prices, but frankly, this deluxe edition is only $10 more, and the deluxe edition, if you want it, is only $40. So, I mean, frankly, $40 more than worth it for this. It's an excellent game. The deluxe edition is interesting. It comes with what they're calling a collaboration DLC, which includes collab stages, collab costume, collab figures, and a DLC bonus of legendary Pac-Land costume. Pac-Land costume really jumps out to me. That's great. As I say, the legacy of platform games starring Pac-Man started way back in 1984 with Pac-Land. So having a costume where he looks like his character in the original Pac-Land is really cool. For those that don't know, in Pac-Land, he had red boots and a kind of Robin Hood-esque red hat, which followed on into some of the cartoon versions of Pac-Man in the 1980s. I don't know what collaboration DLC, collab stages, collab costume, collab figures, I don't know what the collab means in this sense. But what's interesting to me, being that I moaned when talking about previous games from this direct presentation, it says collaboration set contents to be released by winter 2025. So what that means is the DLC is not ready yet. So it's not a case of, oh, there's content that was ready, but if you want it on the first day, you have to pay for the deluxe edition. No, they're not hiding it behind a paywall at all. This is DLC as it should be, DLC that is releasing later. You just have the choice, if you want to pay your extra $10 and then be able to get that DLC at a later date when it's ready. And you get the bonus of having that Pac-Land costume. So I actually think that's very cool. It's only $10 more, and they're not hiding content that's already ready behind the deluxe edition. They're just saying if you buy the deluxe edition, it's basically like you're pre-ordering the DLC. And I think that's a lot easier to swallow. If you pre-order, you gain early access to costumes and figures. It says 4 costumes and 4 figures will be unlocked at the game start. However, again, in doing it the right way, as far as I'm concerned, this isn't costumes and figures which are hidden behind the pre-order, forcing you to pre-order, otherwise you'll never be able to get them. No, you can unlock the costumes and figures just by progressing through the game. So again, it's giving you a nice little bonus if you pre-order, but you absolutely don't have to. And I assume it's the same with the collaboration DLC as well, which it says is going to be released in winter 2025. We don't have a price for that yet. I don't know whether you're going to save yourself any money by buying the deluxe edition for $40. And the physical version is $30, and obviously doesn't come with that deluxe edition. So I would hope that the DLC, when it eventually comes out, is only $10, but we don't know. But frankly, $30 or $40 to me is an absolute bargain for this game. Oh, and one other thing, if you own the previous game, Pac-Man World Re-Pac 1, you also get a Pac-Man costume. So you basically get another character or another costume for absolutely free, just as a reward for owning both versions of the game. So again, I really, really love that. I think it's great when you get free rewards for loyalty by owning two versions or by buying a previous game. So again, Bandai Namco really doing things the right way, I think. I really like the way they're doing the DLC and the pre-orders and the bonuses with this game. It's not scummy at all, and I think companies like EA and especially 2K and even Sega, sadly, could really learn from this. I think Bandai Namco are doing it right. I will be buying the game keycard version. I'll probably be buying the physical Switch 1 version too, just because I'm a collector of Pac-Man and I love this game so much. But yeah, $30 or even $40 for the deluxe version, absolute bargain. And if you can't tell by how much I'm being enthusiastic about this goes in at S tier, obviously. And for me, sorry, Plants vs. Zombies, but it's beating out Plants vs. Zombies. This is my #1 game of the announcements so far. Okay, so that was my Pac-Man themed clip episode special. I used to hate when my favourite TV shows released a new episode that was mostly clips packaged together. I hope you guys don't mind me combining these 3 clips from different episodes and understand why I did it rather than just putting out the Shadow Labyrinth mini review by itself. And hopefully the introduction was an interesting enough musing and gave some insight onto how and why I do what I do on this channel. I'm not just a paid presenter for a big corporate entity putting out content for the sake of it. No, it's just me making this stuff because I'm passionate about it and putting out stuff that I genuinely care about. Sure, my quest to cover every single game means that sometimes I talk about things that I don't care about too much, but I try and find ways to make them interesting to me or have fun personal anecdotes or historical musings on the history of the games industry or stuff that I just love in the thumbnails, etc. Like including Killy Kapowski and talking about the history of Sega during my Madden coverage, or the multiple stories about my grandparents and cousins when musing about FIFA versus Electronic Arts. Not to mention, it was another excuse to put Alize in the thumbnail. Can I get away with it again for this video just because I've mentioned her here? No, I shouldn't. But will I? I don't know. I've not made it yet. If I do, feel free to call me out. It's all engagement. It's all good. That's going to wrap it up for today, friends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and you can join the free members area and enter our free competition to win official Nintendo stuff. Plus, listen to, follow, or support the show in any way that you see fit. Thank you very much for those that do at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. And please, even if you hate Drag and Drive, or Drag X Drive as most people think it's called, when it goes live, consider giving my deep dive review a look. It should be going live the same day as this, so I'm not cheaping out and just giving you a clip episode without a real episode at the same time. I think I've got some pretty interesting Nintendo history and Switch to Future-esque angles to explore Drag and Drive from, even if you think you don't care about it or don't like the game itself. Thanks again. Later, guys.